we, post-Katrina, became quite involved with what's been happening down there just as a result of the concern that a lot of the artists that we work with needed and wanted to know how they could support and help to rebuild and sustain and better understand what happened. There was a lot of confusion after Katrina and the floods as to why the situation was what it was, and then of course it being the historic birthplace of American music, a lot of people feel quite passionate and connected to it, and of course we all felt like we had to do our part. So as a result of that, we, with our partners, Futures of Music Coalition, started these retreats that we call artist-activist retreats, and it was an opportunity to bring a small group of musicians to New Orleans. And we spent time in the community, bearing witness to what happened, understanding what went wrong, what needed to happen, and how these national musicians could help get them, make sure that New Orleans was recovering.
I mean, I've been going to New Orleans since the Mekons played down there in 1989, and it's been a place I've wanted to go back to a lot. Somebody once said to me it was like the northernmost Caribbean city. It wasn't really an American city at all, and if you go there, that makes a lot of sense. I'm very interested in like reggae music, and a lot of where reggae music came from initially, ska music, was actually listening to New Orleans music over the AM radio waves, and I don't know, it's just been a very inspirational place for me, possibly more so since Katrina going down there, and then suddenly having. I always felt like a bit of a tourist wandering around. Going to Jazz Fest and having a wonderful time and eating the great food. But after Katrina, this retreat allowed for, I think, a lot of the artists was kind of a glimpse behind the curtain. We actually, I was fascinated by Mardi Gras Indians, and I'd, see them marching in the streets and just thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and the whole story behind it. And then we went to see Donald Harrison's wife. We actually went to her FEMA trailer and hung out with her while she was still, they call it beading, don't they? Yeah. So a lot of that, like just sitting driving around on a bus through the 9th Ward, looking at the, it looks like that was like the 5th retreat I was on.
Yes.
And it still looked, it was just incredible. It looked like the First World War, There was just grass. Al Johnson, who was, you see some photographs coming up of him outside his new house, but he had a big hit in 1961 with a song called Carnival Time, which they play every year at Mardi Gras. And I was sitting next to him on the bus, and we were driving around, and it was just incredible. We went to his house where there was nothing there. There was just a number of his house painted on the sidewalk, and we stood outside, and he'd written a song about it, and he sang a song outside the house, and I actually filmed him singing this song and then played it on the radio when I go back to Chicago. It was an incredibly moving thing.
As we discussed on the retreat, and which should be common discourse, I think that all musicians owe a great debt to New Orleans, and I grew up listening to Motown and 60s pop the most, and I think that's one of my greatest influences, and so that R&B and jazz that's the birthplace, and so it's a privilege and it's an honor to go to the place and pay your respects and sort of recognize where it all comes from. And to this date, I don't know, I've never experienced live music the way I experienced it in New Orleans, where it makes you love music, like you don't do it for a living, or you don't try to do it for a living, And I think it's a very sincere, authentic feeling and an energy that I've never encountered anywhere else.
New Orleans is unique in that music is that town. You feel it everywhere. Everywhere you go, there are people playing every day, every night. It's like this. It's like South by Southwest all the time. And everyone you meet is involved in some way in the music industry. So nowhere that I've ever been is music such a part of the fabric of everyday life in that town.
So one thing I like to talk to folks about when they're coming into town, and Mike touched on this, is the role that music has in everyday life in New Orleans, and it is a more Caribbean way of living in that music is there to perform a social function, more than just entertainment or more than the expression of an individual. It's something a community does for very specific reasons, and one aspect of that is evident in the Mardi Gras Indian community when music is used to talk about yourself, talk about your neighborhood. What compels young people to get involved is it's less of a music industry and more of a music culture. That is, the imperative to pick up a horn is seldom economic. It's sort of known, as bad as things have gotten now and as much work needs to be done on the musician's ability to earn money from music, it wasn't a cash cow before the levees broke. And folks understood the difference was the cost of living was significantly lower and there were a lot more tourists to fill up the house every night. But primarily what we've seen is that kids are more engaged, that there are more kids learning how to make Indian suits. There are more kids at second lines. The infrastructure is an issue. Access to music education in schools is severely limited by the budget and pig-headedness at different levels of government. But the desire for of young people to engage this has never been higher because the value that it has, the social function it performs of cohesion and of identity of a community has never been more vital. So the issue isn't how to keep kids interested. The issue is can we have systems and infrastructure in place to channel that drive and support it. It'll happen one way or the other, but it can happen with a greater or lesser degree of influence of the elders of the tradition and with a greater or lesser multiplying value for the economics of the city. So people can't wait to do it. They just need to have the teacher, they need to have the horn, they need to have the infrastructure around them.
One of the things that makes New Orleans so special is these musicians, they don't really have a choice. Music is not just what they do, it's who they are. And that's both the great thing and the heartbreaking thing about it is they don't really have an option to go do something else. They're musicians. That's in their souls, and so when that's taken away, or the ability to make a living at that is taken away, then you have the tragedy on the scale that we have now. And I don't think anybody's ever going to dissuade anyone from going to the music world down there because that's just part of the soul of the place, and that's why it's so special.